You are listening to episode number 71 of the Everything Ham Radio podcast. Today we are talking with Ian Kahn again, and this time we're talking about Field Day, because it's coming up right around the corner. So stay tuned. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Everything Ham Radio podcast. This week we are talking again with Ian Kahn, Kilo Mike 4 India Kilo. We talked to him about a month ago or so about the PSK31. And this time we're talking about Field Day. Now, if you listened back to that episode, you'll remember that he mentioned that he is in charge of his Field Day for his club. So I thought, perfect person to bring onto the show and talk to us about what it takes to run a field day, to be in control of what happens and what it's all about. So we're bringing him back. We're going to talk to him again. The last time we had him on, that episode for PSK 31 has skyrocketed up my top charts, and it currently sits at the time of this recording on Monday, March 29th. It currently sits in the number 3 slot, and it is ever so slowly, or ever so quickly, I guess you could say, moving up. It's only about 15 or so downloads or so until it gets to number 2. It's got a long ways to get to number 1, but it's going to get number 2 probably by the time this airs. So I hope that this episode does great, does just as good as the PSK 31 one does. So yeah, I hope it does. Before we get started, you can find all the stuff that we're going to be talking about in the show notes of today's episode, and you can find that at everythinghamradio.com/podcast/71. That's the number 71. You can find me on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/everythinghamradio. For my groups, I have a page still as well. That's facebook.com/everythinghamradio. I'm on YouTube at youtube.com/everythinghamradio, and on Twitter at K5CLM. So, I guess let's go ahead and get to our interview with Ian. We are here again with Ian Kahn, and his call sign is Kilo Mike 4 India Kilo. You might remember him back from a couple episodes ago where we talked about PSK 31. Well, this time we're talking about Field Day. But before we get started, we are recording on Monday, May 29th, 2017, and as many of you know, that was Memorial Day. And both of us are just extremely proud of this country and the stuff that the sacrifices that people have made, the sacrifices that families have made. And Ian, why don't you go ahead and say what you told me before we started recording?
Sure. So it's Memorial Day. From the bottom of my heart, I want to send out a thank you and God bless to anyone that's listening, to everyone out there who have lost family members in service to this great nation of ours. All of the airmen, soldiers, sailors, Marines, Coast Guardsmen, and first responders who have given and paid the ultimate price so that we can live in the freedom that we live in and have the choices that we live, or have the freedom to make the choices that we make. Without their sacrifice, this would not be the country that it is today. Mm-hmm. And we need to remember that freedom isn't free. And those people that have served basically wrote a blank check to the federal government that said, up to and including my life for anything you may ask me to do at any time, any day of the week, regardless of anything else. And on some people, the government cashed that check. And the English language doesn't give us any words stronger than thank you and God bless. But I wish we had something stronger to say. But to all of those people, my heartfelt thank you and God bless. And we do appreciate it. And, I have the deepest respect for military families everywhere and first responder families everywhere. So that That's the serious business that I needed, that I felt like I wanted to conduct tonight, and I appreciate you giving me the 30 to 40 seconds to say that, Curtis.
Absolutely. You know, I come from a family that has a deep military background as well. My grandfather served right after World War II, joined the military, and actually joined in the Navy actually at 17, lied on his birth certificate or whatever it was, his enrollment papers or whatever, to get in there early to help serve his country. And my uncle was in the military. His oldest son was in the military. You know, it's the ultimate sacrifice that we make, and the families of those soldiers make an even greater sacrifice, really, in a lot of ways, because they're the ones that are stuck at home, not knowing what their loved one is doing, where they're at, you know, all that. So, you know, not only the people that are there, but the people that are here at home, and a lot of times don't get the support that they need. So, I mean, you know, thank you from the bottom of my heart, all of y'all that have served, all the veterans out there. Thank you so very much, and we greatly appreciate the cost that y'all paid for our right to say that we live in a free country.
Absolutely.
So,
amen.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so now that has been said, I think maybe let's move on to something maybe a little bit lighter subject. You know, starting out the episode with such a deep topic is something that just kind of, you know, makes my eyes water a little bit. And
absolutely.
And stuff.
So, but it gets a lot lighter from here. Yeah,
it does. So please continue. So like I said, today we are talking about Field Day, and if you'll remember back 4 episodes ago where we talked about PSK31, which, like I said in the introduction, has rapidly grown in my total number of downloads. In 1 month, it has reached the number 3 slot of my all-time downloads, and it's second only to stealth antennas and lightning protection are the 2 topics that are above it, and it's fixing to pass the lightning protection. So that episode was absolutely awesome, and I highly anticipate that this one is going to be awesome as well.
We're gonna have fun tonight.
Oh yeah,
we're talking about good stuff, and I'm impressed that people are that interested in digital modes and in PSK, because God knows I'm not that interesting to listen to. But you know, stealth antennas and lightning protection are both very important topics, and it's only fitting that should the PSK episode park at number 3, those are the 2 things that are ahead of it, because you know, with the increasing number of neighborhoods that are under HOAs that are, you know, draconian is a very tough word to use, but a lot of these neighborhoods are incredibly draconian about their, you know, what you can and can't do in and around your home. That's an important topic. Stealth antennas are an important topic, and lightning protection for all of us. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to be the guy that has to call the insurance company and say, yeah, I just lost $25,000 worth of radio gear to a lightning strike.
Yeah, so. that actually happened to my dad. If you haven't listened to that episode, the lightning directly struck my dad's antenna, and it fried all of his radio equipment, all of his computers, his stove, microwave, refrigerator, AC, phones, televisions, all that stuff. And he came out smelling like a rose, because he had like a Pentium 1 computer and CRT monitors, and he had this old Kenwood radio that had this one special functionality on it. And when he went to replace it, the only radio that had that one special functionality on it was about $2,000. And,
nice.
Yeah, and he came, you know, he got like Pentium 4 computers, flat screen monitors. I mean, he came out smelling like a rose, I swear.
So I'm actually going to use that to segue in a little bit. No, that's actually timely to what we're talking about, and it's, you know, it maybe comes a little later in the discussion this evening, but safety around Field Day. You know, we're all in temporary setups. We don't necessarily have all the right lightning protection in place. Mm-hmm. You know, you're throwing antennas in trees in a public place. You know, you're in a park or in a shopping center parking lot or whatever. Be careful. If the weather looks like it's going to turn ugly, shut it down. disconnect your antennas. Safety first. Always safety first.
Absolutely.
Field day is important, and I'm sure I'll talk about the whys and wherefores here in a few minutes when you seed me those questions. But please, if you've read the ARRL Field Day packet the last couple of years, there is actually a position now and bonus points for having a safety officer that either the safety officer or a member of his or her team is on your site for the entire time you operate, whether you operate 3 hours, 6 hours, the entire 24 hours, or whether you're really good and can get the whole 27 hours. You get a bonus points for safety officers. Safety first. We don't want anybody getting hurt.
Mm-hmm.
We had an operation here in the Atlanta area several years ago, and I'm not going to give away any names or call signs. They were set up at a lake, and they took a lightning strike, lost a bunch of equipment, and were very lucky that nobody got hurt. And it wasn't they were being careless. They weren't doing things they weren't supposed to do. But lightning is a fickle monster. And
wrong place, wrong time.
Yep. They were just in the wrong place at the wrong time, doing the wrong things, and the gear was insured. They were able to replace it all. You can't replace a human life. So please remember, as we're talking about all this and we're having fun, remember it is the summer, and in a lot of parts of the country, I know down here in the Southeast, thunderstorms can pop up literally in minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So be mindful of the weather and play it safe. And if you get into a thunderstorm situation, disconnect your antennas and shut down.
Right.
All right. Let's move on to the really good fun stuff. I'm tired of all this heavy.
All right. So let's talk about just kind of a general overview of what Field Day is. What is it? When is it? And just kind of like talk about some general rules, I guess you could say, of what Field Day is. So first off, what is Field Day?
Field Day is different things to different people. Officially, according to the ARRL, if you go to the ARRL website and click on their Field Day links and you download their packet, the quote unquote Field Day packet, which is the Bible of rules and regulations and do's and don'ts for Field Day, and they publish a new one every year. The purpose of Field Day is to be a demonstration of amateur radio capabilities in times of emergency or disaster when normal lines of communication are down. Kind of, it's the public demo of the when all else fails mentality.
Mm-hmm. The zombie apocalypse.
Yes. We're prepping for the zombie apocalypse here. But within that kind of broad guideline, it's different things to different people and different clubs and different organizations. So to my club, it is, let's show the public what we can do. And we set up in a city park here in the suburb of Atlanta I live in is called Roswell, Georgia, not to be confused, please, with the one in New Mexico with the little green men from outer space. Roswell, Georgia. It's it's an old mill town is really how it got its start, well before the Civil War, and it's grown to be a very well thought of and well respected suburb here in Atlanta. And one of the things that the city has done deliberately and incredibly well is we have amazing parks here. So we set up in a City of Roswell park, and our park, we're lucky because our park happens to be at a fairly high elevation in the city. So we take advantage of that. But we set up in a park so that when people come in to the park, they can't come into the park without seeing us. And we're set up in the parking lot, and we've got the picnic shelter, and we've got radios and set up in the, right in the middle of the parking lot where you can't miss them. And we've got wires and trees and wires over baseball fields and soccer fields and beams in the air. I mean, it's
a sight to see. A sight to see.
It is a sight to see, but we want people to come in and see all this and ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
Two of our served agencies, two of the other municipalities in the area that we serve, lend us their police forces, mobile command posts, at least for the Saturday portion of field day. So we have 2 mobile command posts, and our Aries folks are set up in those. And they're sending NTS traffic, National Traffic System traffic, which is the national kind of FEMA standard for how you format your messages when you're sending any kind of emergency traffic, health and welfare or request for supplies or things like that. So they're demoing that, and they're demoing GoKits and digital for emergency communications purposes, and that's what they're over there doing. And it's 2 big campers, so it draws attention, it attracts attention. We've got 3 stations set up around, 3 primary stations set up around the park. We've got a go-to station in the picnic shelter. In the morning Saturday, while other guys are doing setup, we've got Boy Scouts doing a radio merit badge class. So we're getting the scouts involved, and sometimes we take advantage of the fact that they're there and let them help us provide a little bit of labor and give them some real world hands-on experience with what they're learning in the merit badge class. We run a get on the air station, a go-to station, and we want people to come in and sit down and get on the air and maybe get interested. We want them to come up and ask questions. We've been fairly successful with that, and we usually, we usually get, a small handful of people every year that are like, hey, I went to field day, and this is really neat, and I want to get my license. Or I stumbled across you at field day and had no idea, and now I'm interested. So, for us, at least my philosophy as our field day chairman, that's how I run it. Other groups do things, their thrust is to demonstrate to their served agencies what their capabilities are. So they're set up in emergency operations centers and operate that way. Mm-hmm. And then there are people that are, just running it from home, as if it were another contest. And the ARRL will tell you explicitly, this is not a contest, even though we keep scores and we submit score packages. And there are, probably a dozen categories of bonus points, and we'll get into all that a little bit later on in the conversation here. But it is not a contest. And in fact, the gentleman that I am succeeding, who ran field day for us the last couple of years, his goal was we typically operate in class 3 alpha, and we'll get into that here a little bit later on. I'll explain what the classes are. We operate class 3 alpha. In the last 2 years, we've had the high score. Wow. And that was his goal, and that was his thrust. My thrust is backsides and seats and people coming through the door. So I want to see a higher number of people, and we log the number of people that come through the site and visit us. And my goal is to have the highest number of visitors, because that means we're increasing our visibility to the general public. Mm-hmm. That to me is what it's about.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And there are folks who, again, they sit at home and they either run off of regular, their power utility, or they run off of emergency power, or there are people that are in their cars doing it mobile. So, so I gave you what the ARRL says field day is, and then, kind of broke it down and to kind of how it means different things to different people too. So I hope that it puts some framework around where we're going tonight and what the rest of the conversation is going to be like.
So I mean, it's basically from anything from one end of the spectrum to the other, what field day is, and the real question you have to ask, I mean, yes, I asked the question, what is field day? And you gave the answer of what it is to you, or what it is to the ARRL. But the real question you have to ask yourself here, all your listeners out there, is what is field day to you? What is your goal in field day? Because it can be anything. It can be, just wanting to sit down and make contacts. It could be, I want to make my first HF contact, or, I want to make 100 contacts while I'm sitting down for an hour, or I want to show, talk to the people that are coming and tell them about this wonderful hobby that we have and all the stuff that we can do, and show them all this stuff. So, I mean, that question is so broad, and you answered it really so well, but you really have to ask yourself, what is field day, and run with it.
Yeah, and keep it all in the context of this is the biggest demo for most of us, for a large number of us. This is our biggest opportunity to show the public why we as hams are still relevant in today's age of cell phones and Twitter and Facebook and faster than instant communications.
Mm-hmm.
This is the biggest thing we can do, because when all that stuff, when the spit hits the fan and all that stuff is gone, this is why we're still relevant.
Exactly. So what are some of the general rules that pertain to field day? Like, can you operate off of commercial power? Can you, set up in a, how big of a setup can you have? Can you have, how many radios can you use? Stuff like that.
So, this kind of goes back again to what is field day to you and what do you want it to be? So if the short and dirty answer, and it's going to require some elaboration later, the short and dirty answer is you can use as many transceivers as you want to and as many transmitted signals as you want to and have as many people as you want to, but it affects how you report back to the ARRL or RAC, Radio Amateurs of Canada, because this event is not just in the U.S., it's the U.S. and Canada. I think it's important to note that. So it's technically an international event, if you want to think about it that way. So there are categories for your operating power. If you operate, so I think we kind of need to talk about classes a little bit first before we start talking about sizes of stations and everything like that. So if you don't mind, I'll take a little liberty with your agenda.
Be my guest.
So if you look at the and I'm looking, you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay. I thought I heard Skype hang up on me. Sorry. If you look at the ARRL packet under Section 4, it talks about they call them the entry categories. These are the classes. There are 6 classes of station. Class A, is for a club or a non-club group of 3 or more people who set up explicitly for field day purposes. And so that's like my club. We set up in the park. We start setting everything up on Friday morning before field day. We're allowed to start setting up at 0 UTC on Friday. So that's about 8 o'clock Thursday evening in the East Coast. We'll start setting up about 10 o'clock Friday morning, 10 o'clock or so Friday morning. So Class A is your club station. So the next part of the question is, how many stations can you run? How many transmitted signals can you have simultaneously is how the league measures it if you read the rules. You can have as many simultaneous transmitted signals as you can fit antennas and transceivers in the 1,000-yard across circle they let you use for your operating area.
1,000 feet. It's 300 meters, 1,000 feet.
Yes, 1,000 feet. You're looking at the same thing I'm looking at, except I can't read tonight. So if you can fit, and there's a club, God love them, we ask ourselves every year how they do this. There is a club in the metro, in the Maryland Metro DC area, and it's a joint group. It's the Potomac Valley Amateur Radio Club and one of the other clubs in that area, in the Metro DC area. They run like 28 or 30 alpha. Mm-hmm. And we still can't figure out how they can handle 30 simultaneous transmitted signals on HF without stepping all over each other. Mm-hmm. I said they operate 30 alpha. So alpha, they're a club or a non-club portable. They're 2 clubs that came together, is the alpha part, and 30 is the number of simultaneous transmitted signals. My club does a little more modest operation. We typically run 3 alpha. And the way we do that is we have a CW station. We have a dedicated sideband station, and then we have a station that we call the swing station. And on that swing station, it's operator's choice what mode you operate. So the operator can sit down and decide he or she wants to operate sideband, and it's up to that person to find some place in the phone frequency where they're not tramping on everybody else that's operating phone. That person can operate CW, and it's up to them to make sure they're not tripping on the CW station. Or they could operate digital if they wanted to, and again, it's up to them to make sure that they're not tripping on other people. If they're operating digital, the odds are pretty good they're not going to trip on other people, because digital, our CW folks generally don't operate in the digital portion of the bands where they're operating, and obviously phone is well above that. So that's one class. That's the alpha class. It's one of the more popular ones. But there are other classes and categories of operation.
Hey, before we go on to that, I talked to a guy. I don't remember what episode it is. I'll look it up and I'll put it in the show notes of the episode today. Last year, when I was doing the Ham Radio Club Spotlight segment in my podcast, I spoke with a guy. I believe he was in Pennsylvania or something like that. But they had it was 30, 34 alpha, something like that. And,
right.
I'm like, how in the world do you do that? And it really got me to thinking, because, I'm like, okay, well, how do you fit, 30 antennas and 30 transmitters and I'm sure several generators to power all this? Yep. How do you do that in such a small area? I'm thinking, 1,000 feet's not really that big.
It isn't.
But
it's a football field.
Right. And I didn't really realize that, because, a couple days ago, I was on one of the Reddit pages, and there was somebody who was asking a question like that on how many transmitters and, stuff like that, and the size to use. And I, posted the comment, just remember that you have to stay within 100-foot diameter. Everything has to be within 100-foot diameter, or 1,000-foot diameter.
1,000 feet, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, and he's like, okay, well, that's no big a deal. Well, somebody else came back on and, showed the formula on how you transfer feet to acres, and it was like 15 acres that encompasses 1,000 feet. That's like twice the size of the property that I live on, and I live on 14 acres. But if you do a 1,000-foot radius, that's basically like 2 of my property, and that's a lot of space. And thinking back now, how they do this 30, 35 stations or whatever, I can kind of see it. I can see the equipment part of it and the structure part of it and the radio part of it. The only thing that I don't maybe quite understand or can't wrap my head around is how you have, because correct me if I'm wrong here, but you can't have 2 stations that are operating the same mode on the same band, right?
At the same time.
Right, at the same time. So
correct.
So you have 30
So how do you do that?
Yeah, how do you have, okay, so you have some stations on 10 meters that are sideband, CW, and digital. Then you have one on 15 meters that are the same thing. So that's like 10, 15, 20,
40 and 80.
40, 80. That's 5 things. How do you have 3, 6, that's 15 radios. Mm-hmm. How do you have 30?
Then you can do 6 meters.
Right.
So, you get one free VHF or UHF station if you're a Class A operator. Let me get through the rest of the classes, and then we'll come back and we can talk about some of this other stuff, because it's my big question is not how do you do that without getting multiple signals on the same band on the same mode at the same time. It's how do you do it without interfering with everybody else? I mean, we struggle with that at 3A. I can't imagine how you do it at 30 alpha.
Right. Okay. Sorry for interrupting. Go ahead.
So alpha is also subdivided. There's class alpha, which is club or non-club portable. Then there's class alpha battery, which is club or non-club portable, and all they're operating off of is solar charged batteries. So that throws an extra challenge into it, and those guys must have a lot of fun with that. We use generators, and we use our CW station usually gets our there's a bonus point for making our bonus points for making like 5 contacts on solar power. So our first 5 contacts on CW are usually done on a battery that's been charged, been sitting out at the park all day, and we've charged it with solar cells. So there's class Bravo, class B, which is just 1 or 2 people portable. It's non-club. It's as if you and I got together and said, hey, let's go set up in the park for field day.
Right.
And then they've got a subclass for battery. Class C is mobile, so that obviously pretty self-explanatory. Class D is home stations that are using commercial power. Now the kicker, if you're working at home and using commercial power, you're not allowed to make contact with other Class D stations, Class Delta stations. So only Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Echo, and Field and Foxtrot. Echo is a home station that's on emergency power. So if I set up in my front yard with a generator or a solar cell or something like that, I could be Class Echo. And then Class Foxtrot is the emergency operations centers. Those are the guys that set up in the Red Cross areas or in their, if you're involved with the Salvation Army, the Salvation Army Team Emergency Radio Network. I think that's what it stands for.
Something like that.
The Salvation Army's amateur radio MCOM group is called Saturn, Sierra Alpha Tango Echo Romeo November. And they can yell at me later if I butchered with the acronym. I beg their forgiveness now instead of later. But in our area, there's a group called the Southern Baptist Mission Board that our area's group was very involved with working their EOC with them and did several activations with them. So that's the Class Foxtrot. So now let's talk about what all that means. It means some different things if you're running Alpha or Foxtrot than it means for the other stations. So
let me interrupt some real fast because when we were talking about Class Delta, you said that Class Delta stations can't contact other Class Delta. But the Class Echo is also the home station, but it's running on emergency power. It is the same as the Class Delta to a point. The Class Echo can work all other field day stations. It doesn't have that limitation of cannot contact Delta. So it actually can make contact with Delta stations or Echo stations. So it's, if you want to run from home, make sure you have a generator sitting out your window or something like that. That way you can contact everybody.
Make sure it's a sunny day and you've got your trickle charger on the battery and your charge controller on the battery, so you're solar charging your battery while you're operating.
Right, something like that.
And that makes you a Class Echo, and that's easy to remember. Echo, emergency power, right?
Exactly.
All right, so I think this would be the absolute perfect time to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to continue our discussion about what field day is with Ian. So stay tuned, we'll be right back after we hear a word from our sponsor, West Mountain Radio.
Are you tired of lousy propagation conditions and wondering how to work some real DX for a change? Maybe you spin the dial and wonder what's going on below the voice segment of the HF bands. The answer is, you're missing out. You're missing out on digital modes, a rapidly growing and exciting part of amateur radio. Work real DX with the incredible JT65 and JT9 modes. It's no exaggeration when I tell you, you will work stations you never thought possible, even using low power and compromised antennas. Have fun making new contacts in modes such as PSK31, Olivia, Radio Teletype, Slow Scan TV, and many more. The Rig Blaster Advantage is everything you need to operate these exciting digital modes. Made right here in the US, the Rig Blaster interface has set the standards for nearly 20 years. Thousands of satisfied operators have learned their Rig Blaster Advantage will provide solid digital communications, easy operating, and reliability. Don't miss out on the fun and excitement any longer. Head on over to everythinghamradio.com/WMR for more information and learn how to get your free USB port monitor with your purchase.
Alright, so we are back with Ian Kahn. We're going to continue our discussion about what field day is. We talked about the classes, so let's talk about some of the available bonuses that you can get with the different classes and stuff like that. So Ian, I guess I'll let you take it away.
So if you're a Class Alpha, which is, remember, the club, 3 or more people or a club operating portable, which is out in the field somewhere, or you're a Class Foxtrot and you're operating 2 Foxtrot or above. And Alpha is, you have to operate 2 Alpha and above. So you have to have a minimum of 2 simultaneously transmitted signals is what that means. You get some perks. You get some bonuses right out of the gate there. So if you're operating at least 2 Alpha or at least 2 Foxtrot, you get what's called a get on the air station, a GOTA station that does not affect your operating class. So in our example, we are class 3 Alpha, and I told you what we use for our stations. We also run a GOTA station. So that's a 4th HF signal on the air, but because we are a club operating 2 Alpha or above, we get to use that get on the air station and not have it affect our operating class. And there are bonus points to a limit, to a maximum that are tied to that GOTA station. So the whole purpose behind the GOTA station is to entice people who either are new to ham radio and are coming to field day because either they stumbled on you in the park, they came to play softball and saw your antennas hanging over their softball field and got curious and asked questions, or it's neighbor came with a buddy who's a ham, or it's a friend you invited to come check it out, see what it's about. This is where those non-licensed people that we're trying to encourage and we're trying to reach out to can sit down and make a few HF contacts. There's a control op. There has to be a control op there. In our club, it's nearly always an extra class operator so that we get the full capabilities of the spectrum. And this is where you hook those people. This is where you demonstrate to those people really and let them experience firsthand the magic of amateur radio, because they get to sit down and make contacts. And in our station, in our field day, the gentleman that runs our GOTA station has run it for the last several years, did an amazing thing. And I wish I'd thought of this years ago. He got a big blow up map of the U.S. and Canada, and he put it on. He had it laminated, and they hang it up over the GOTA station. And when somebody makes a contact with a new state or a new province, they fill it in. They marker it and color it in with magic markers, and it gives the uninitiated a really good visual of what they've just done. You're sitting here in Georgia and you just talked to a guy in British Columbia, which is on the west coast and well north of here. And that really gets a lot of people interested and hooks a lot of people in. According to the field day rules, the GOTA station can also be used by anyone, regardless of amateur radio class and operating habit, that's been licensed since the previous field day. So if you got licensed the day after field day ended last year and you've been operating HF all year long, you're still eligible to get on the GOTA station. It's also for what the ARRL calls generally inactive hams, and they describe that or they define that as people that have been inactive or not on HF in the last 3 years. I haven't qualified for that. Let's see, I got licensed in 2007. I didn't qualify for that category since 2008. But
sadly to say, I've been qualified for that for the past 10 years or so. So.
But you're going to get everything set up, and we're going to have some PSK contacts.
I actually have my radio and my tuner here on my desk, ready to plug in. My power supply is hooked up. All I got to do is mount my antenna and run my coax, and I'm good. I'm getting there. I'm one step closer.
Excellent. One step at a time, baby steps.
Right.
But back to a GOTA station. Well, let me wrap this up real quick on the GOTA station. So you can get up to 500 points or 500 contacts for points out. I think it's 500 points out of the GOTA station. That's over and above anything else you earn on your other stations, and those are free. Those are bonus points for you. The other thing you get by being a 2A or a 2F station or above is you get a free VHF UHF station. So that means if the 6 meter gods are playing nicely for us on field day weekend, and it's always hit or miss whether they are or aren't, you can get on 6 meters and use that as another station. Or, if you've got a group of people that loves getting on 2 meters or 440 or 220 and they feel like they can make some contacts, those all become freebies as well over and above your 2 Alpha, 3 Alpha, 2 Foxtrot, 3 Foxtrot, whatever have you. So those are kind of the perks to being either an EOC or a club station.
Okay, so why? Let me ask you this. Okay, why have a GOTA station over just adding another transmitter? Why not go to, if you're running 3 Alpha and you have the GOTA station, why not just bump to 4 Alpha? Because any ham can get on the radio as long as you have a control operator, so they can use any radio at field day. So why a GOTA station over a regular station?
You know what? I can't give you any definitive, this is in the field day rules, why we do this. I can give you my thoughts and my opinion on it. And speaking as, my first big event, I got licensed in 2007, took the test in April, got my license, showed up on the FCC database in the first week of May. My first big event was June. And I got to tell you, to jump right into a contest level operation, even though it's not a contest, it was a little intimidating. You go to the get on the air station, and the guy sitting there next to you or the gal sitting there next to you, their whole purpose is to guide you and Elmer you and coach you through making those first contacts. And it's meant to be a no-pressure way to make the contacts. I know in our operation, if there's an opportunity, I'm trying to think how to phrase this without some of my friends here hearing this and getting really upset with me. If I'm the guy operating and I've got a fabulous run going, I'm not stopping.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm on one of our primary stations, and we kind of encourage our operators, get on, find your frequency, and start running it. You're going to get more points and you're going to make more contacts by running a frequency than you are by spinning the dial and searching and pouncing.
Mm-hmm.
Even though officially this is not a contest. And I try not to run my operation like a contest. But I tell you what, when my tail goes in the chair and I put the cans on my head and I start operating, I go right into contest mode. And
but it's not a contest.
But it's not a contest. But I don't want to be in it. But don't interrupt me if I've got a good run going and I'm holding a frequency and I'm rattling off the contacts. Please don't. And it's the same way when I'm in a true contest and I'm in contest mode. Please don't interrupt me. Don't stop and ask me questions. We want the public to see what we're doing. And if I have opportunity and can provide an opportunity for somebody to get on the air, I'm absolutely gonna slide over and have them sit down and work with me. But my best example of where this happened to me, and this is something that this is kind of one of my regrets, God, I wish I'd done it differently. Several years ago, we had our park that we use is in the neighborhood is mixed. One side of it is a nice middle class neighborhood. One side of it is a little bit economically challenged. And, some of the local kids came into the park, and they came in as we were setting up our picnic, and they wanted to eat. Well, one of our club members' wives is a school principal. And she said, okay, we'll let you get a sandwich, but here's what you have to do to earn it. And it was, you've got to come listen for a few minutes to a couple of guys talk to you about ham radio. You've got to go sit down at the GOTA station and make your contacts. Then we'll be more than happy to let you share our food. So the kids did what they were asked. And some of them had kind of the little chip on their shoulder attitude. And, that was okay. We dealt with it. The next morning, Sunday morning, I'm sitting in the chair operating, and one of the kids came back. And I was in the middle of the best run I have ever had. I worked 200 contacts in 2 hours.
Wow.
And my wife came up to me later and she said, "Hey, one of those kids from yesterday came back and wanted to get on the air with you. But I didn't bother you because you were in the middle of I could tell you were in a zone and you were just gone. And so I didn't bother you." And I look at that and, I kick myself for that because that was an opportunity missed on our part.
Mm-hmm.
But that's exactly the kind of reason why you have the go-to station, is so that those folks that see it and they think, hey, it's really interesting, get the chance to come back and sit down, and you can get them on in a no-pressure environment where people aren't going to have head down because they're working 200 because they've got the band 20 meters opened up and it's 200 stations in an hour. Or 100 stations an hour run rate, and they just don't look up and see what's going on around them.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why they go to station.
I can understand that.
That's in my opinion. It's let's make sure those people that come back, that want to experience it and want to get on the air, have the opportunity without guys like me being idiots and not looking around and missing the opportunities.
So I'm sure that a lot of people do this, and we never did when we were running field day in my club. And you mentioned that you use headphones on your stations. Do you also have a external speaker where somebody that just wants to listen can hear every station too? Oh, that's good.
Yes.
Well, let's talk real quickly before we go to break real fast. Let's talk about a couple of the bonuses that are real easy to get, or there's so many of them. I know
there are,
and they're. Let me get this straight out here, y'all. There will be a complete list of all of the field day information in the show notes. The packet will be there. The rules will be there. The summary sheets, all that, there will be links in the show notes of today's episode. So we're not going to talk about every little thing, but let's talk about some of the easy ones to get and how you go about doing it.
So you go to the ARRL Fields website, ARRL.org/field-day. That's the field day site, and hit the packet and all the rules are there. Everything we're going to talk about, and all the bonuses are there. So go to station. If you have a go to station, that's up to 500 QSOs worth of bonus points right off the bat.
And
if you want to talk about low-hanging fruit.
Does the go-to station have the same multiplier as the regular stations, or is it just 1 point per
There are no
QSO?
multipliers. Yeah, there are no multipliers for field day. You get 1 point for every phone contact and 2 points for every CW or digital contact.
Okay.
And that's it. That's how you do it.
I mean, if you're running CW on a go-to station and an old ham that hasn't been active in forever but still knows this code, do you still get the 2 points for CW?
You do.
Okay, cool.
Yep, same points. And you get up to 500 QSOs. The packet, I'm looking at it right now, it says up to 500 QSOs. So I've got to imagine that's if you're running digital or CW, that's up to 1,000 points. Another really easy one is the W1AW bulletin. So I would hope, well, no, I won't assume. So for those that are new to amateur radio that are listening, so W1AW, Whiskey 1 Alpha Whiskey, is the amateur radio call sign of the American Radio Relay League. And that was, Hiram Percy Maxim, who was the founder of the ARRL, that was his call sign. And the league got it through whatever mechanisms after he passed on. So for field day, they put out a special bulletin. And they start transmitting it sometime during field day week. It's in the packet. I'm not going to try to get the exact timelines right because I'll mess it up. But they send it out via phone. They send it out via CW. They send it out via typically PSK31. They may do RIDI as well. I can't recall. And they do it a number of times in each mode throughout the field day weekend period. So there's like 12.5 or 24 opportunities to get it. So, that's worth bonus points. And then there's a station, W1AW out of Newington at the league headquarters transmits it. And then for the folks on the West Coast where there may be propagation issues, there's a station out on the West Coast that acts as their proxy and transmits it on the West Coast side. And between the two of them, a station anywhere in the U.S. or Canada should have the opportunity to pick up that bulletin. If you can get elected officials in your community to come to your field day, that's a bonus point, or that's bonus points. If you can get a representative of one of your areas group served agencies to come, that's bonus points. And those are, if your areas group has a good relationship with the various agencies, other agencies in the area, and the served agency can be Red Cross, Salvation Army, local police station, local fire department. We always get those bonus points because, like I said, we're getting 2 police mobile command posts on display for our areas group, and they have to be delivered by representatives of that agency. So we snag those guys when they show up and say, "Hey, you're here. Welcome to our field day site." And we get a couple of pictures of them on site, and that covers that for us. A little more challenging. Have an educational event. And that's really easy. I mentioned at the top of the show, my club does a field day, or does a radio merit badge for the Boy Scouts for field day. That's an educational event. One of our club members last year and the year before set up a table in the middle of the park and was teaching CW. He's one of these guys that he got licensed and he loves CW and QRP. He fell in love with that stuff, so he's sharing that with the rest of the crowd. And he just he took it upon himself. He just kind of set up a table and said, hey, I'm going to teach people a little bit of CW. That's an educational opportunity, or an educational activity. And you can do it once, you can do it 12 times over the course of the 24 hours. It doesn't matter. You get those bonus points. There are bonus points for sending a quote unquote emergency message or an emergency traffic message to the section manager. There is traffic for sending 10 NTS messages. There are bonus points for using alternate fuel source. So, like I said, we do solar. We use a battery that's solar charged. That's worth 5 contacts on. That's worth bonus points. Those are some of the really easy ones. A couple of the more challenging, the satellite. There's a bonus points for a satellite contact, and that can be challenging because you have to pay attention to where the birds are, when they are, and it takes a little bit of planning to make sure that you can actually connect to a satellite and get a contact with somebody else because they're really, really busy. So that's one of the more challenging and more exciting when you get that one. A couple of years ago, one of the people that's a big satellite op in our club said, "Hey, right as field day kicks off, the International Space Station is going to be doing a flyover where we could make a contact with them. I don't make any promises, but I'm going to try."
Cool.
And we didn't have a whole lot of high expectations. In his first call to the ISS, he got a contact with them. Wow. So, ladies and gentlemen, your mileage may vary. Those are some of the things that you get bonus points for. You want real easy bonus points? Send out a press release. There are bonus points and the newspapers don't have to print it. You just have to send it out to them and say, hey, tell the public about this through your local media outlets. All you have to do is say, here's the press release we sent. I can't tell you if they ran it or not. And that's bonus points. The full list, of course, is in the ARRL Field Day packet, which Curtis will link to in the show notes after when we get done here tonight.
Hey, some of the other ones I'm reading through this packet as we go as well too. But things like a public location. You set up in a park. Mm-hmm. That's 100 points right there.
Yep. Or a mall parking lot.
Yeah.
Or on your sidewalk.
Yeah, true.
That might run afoul of the local constabulary because you're blocking a right of way, but that's a public place.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. A public information table. If you have bulletins or the flyers from the ARRL or from your club or something like that, stick them on a table. That's your information table. So there's so much bonus points that you can claim. Most of them are 100 points or so, and they're super easy to get. So I mean, 3/4 of the ones would take like 5 minutes to do. to set up or plan for and stuff like that. So if you don't get the majority of the bonus points, there's something wrong with your setup.
So make sure we made a mistake last year. And I'm saying this for, learn from our mistakes. Make sure that you have somebody that's designated to get photos of the important people that you need to have on site. Make sure there's somebody taking a picture of, if one of your city or county council members shows up, make sure there's a picture with that person. When your served agency shows up, make sure there's a picture of that person, engaged with one of your club members at your field day site, because the league actually asks you to send in, proof that you earned these bonus points. So, you send in, for example, when you do the NTS traffic, you send in the message sheets, the NTS sheets that go with it. When you send in, the WNAW bulletin, you actually send in the copy of the bulletin that you copied down. Things like that are important. And if you're doing it from a club perspective, have somebody on your field day committee whose job is to make sure that all those are accounted for. And we can talk about that. I think the next segment here is going to be planning, so we can talk about that in the next segment a little bit.
Yep, and that is a perfect time to wrap this up for this segment. We will be right back.
Hi, this is Dan, KB6NU, author of the No Nonsense Amateur Radio License Study Guides. My study guides have helped thousands get their license or upgrade to general class or extra class, and they can help you too. What makes them unique is my no-nonsense style. I don't bamboozle you with a lot of text. Instead, I give you just what you need to know in a simple, straightforward way that's designed to help you pass the test. One reader even told me, your study guide explained in a couple of paragraphs topics that the license manual needed a couple of pages to cover. Another wrote, the clarity and simplicity of your descriptions blew the license manual away. My study guides are available in paperback, in a variety of ebook formats, and even as audiobooks. Get your copy today. Go to kb6nu.com/ETHR for more info. Thanks.
All right, we are back, and again, we are talking with Ian Kahn, KM4IK, about Field Day. We had a very long segment this last time, but there was a lot of information in there, so I wanted to make sure and the conversation was just going, so I couldn't stop us. It just wasn't. So this is going to be a long episode, y'all. We're already an hour into this already, and we still have a lot more to talk about, so it's probably going to be a two-hour episode, I'm sure. But in this segment, we're going to be talking about planning a field day. But you said that you're in charge of planning it, and you have several times before. So First off, what is it like to plan such a large event?
You're familiar with the expression herding cats. It's I don't try to do it all by myself. And anybody that tries to do, and for our club, this is a big event. This is one of our two main events of the year. So I recruit people from within my club to be in charge of different aspects. So I have one person who is responsible for our CW station. And we refer to them as captains, station captains, or different captains or chairs within field day. So I've got one member of our club that's responsible for our CW station, and his job is to make sure there's a CW station, that it's fully equipped, and that's everything from power supply to the antennas. So power supply, transceiver, key, the antennas. The antennas are provided by the club. The club has a stock of antennas that we've built over the years for field day, and one of our members houses them in his attic. He's got a wood shop, and above the wood shop, he's got storage. So he lets us use that for our field day supplies that include several of the antennas and a bunch of other miscellaneous supplies. But each of our station captains is responsible for putting together their station and finding the operators to work it. So we divvy that up. We've got our safety captain. I mentioned before that that's a bonus. That's actually a bonus point category. We're talking about that in the last segment. So somebody that's responsible for safety. I've got station captains for our CW, for our phone, our CW, our satellite station, our satellite station, which is for bonus points, our VHF UHF station, our GOTA station. Then I've got somebody that's responsible for doing the radio merit badge that we put on, the radio merit badge clinic that we put on for the Boy Scouts. We've got, I think I mentioned this before, food. I mean, we're hams. We like to eat.
Yeah, duh.
A lot of clubs, one of the things we do, and a lot of clubs do this, is our big summer club picnic is at field day. And, we're in a public park. We rent the park, or, various parts of the facilities to include the picnic shelter at the park for the duration of field day. So, we have a huge picnic. The club covers the cost of the barbecue. And then the membership brings a covered dish, a side dish, or a dessert. And it's great. Everybody comes together. We all sit around and chat and have a good time. And it's a good chance to spend an hour or two sitting, eating, and talking to people you might not otherwise get to see or talk to throughout the course of other programs or other events, because you're hanging with your buds, or you part of the planning and the program, so you don't have time to sit around and schmooze or whatever have you. So we work really hard to delegate, and it's my job to make sure everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing, or your field day chair's job to make sure that all your other, your captains and your chairs and your committee people are doing their job, just like any other event. But it's a lot like herding cats. So, and I was very deliberate in my choice of station captains this year. I chose a number of people that are younger in terms of experience in doing things like this, in an effort to try to get some of the newer, younger, less experienced members of the club involved and get them doing things. Because field day, like everything else, follows the same 80-20 rule. 20% of the people do 80% of the work, and it's the same 20% of the people. So I've tried real hard to get some new blood kind of infused, and hopefully they'll pick up and move on and carry on when I step down and hand my mantle back to the club next year. Or on June, let's see, field day is the 25th and 24th and 25th, so on the 26th when I hand the mantle back.
So do you start planning for the next field day like immediately after field day, or do y'all start like in January? Or
when I'm running it, I typically start in January. We have other things going on throughout the second half of the year in addition, to field day. We have other events that my club puts on, and we have club Christmas party and other things that take up our bandwidth. So I start January. This year, I actually waited until late February, early March to get started.
Behind the eight ball already?
Well, not really. Because, a lot of it is kind of prepackaged already. We've done it so many times. We've got our gear in place, or we've got our people in place. For the new folks, it's been a little bit of a challenge, and I probably should have started a little bit earlier. But, that's neither here nor there, because it's still going to come together. It's still going to be great, and we're all going to have a good time. But I used to start in January, and, it started with a postmortem on last year's, or a review of the postmortem on the previous year's field day and what worked and what didn't, and we moved from there. If we needed to tweak anything, we talked about that and discussed that. I think we've gotten to the point where, the people that are involved, we always have some veteran blood on the field day team. So, for continuity's sake. And, you start when you feel like you need to start. There are clubs that just started, in the last 3 weeks, and they'll be fine, and they'll put together what they need to put together, and it'll come together for them, and they'll have a great field day. So, again, it goes back to what is field day to you, and what do you want to get out of it?
So let's say that you are a club that's never done field day. What are some pointers that you can give them to find a location on where to have field day, finding equipment and stuff like that, or let's start there.
The site is going to be driven by, again, what's your goal? What are you trying to get out of it? If you're operating a Class A, my suggestion, my philosophy on it is find the most public place you could possibly set up in. So find a park in your community that's well accessed and easily accessed and has a lot of traffic and is in preferably a higher elevation for your area. In our part of the country, we're in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. So northeast Georgia is fairly hilly. So it's important to make sure that we find a spot that's at a fairly high elevation relative to our surroundings, and the park we use is. If you're someplace, like in the Midwest that's a little flatter, not quite as mountainous, it's, your altitude above sea level is going to be a little less important. But the accessibility and the public access and foot traffic is what I would look for. You may want someplace that has, maybe a picnic shelter or two that you can use to set up some of your stations, or have a picnic, or to go along with field day, or something of that nature. You need to pay attention to places to put antennas. Not all parks, not all public places are good places to have a field day, because raising antennas is hard, especially if you're going to use wire antennas, beams, or dipoles or loops or things of that nature. The park that we use has a big soccer field that has lights, has very tall light stanchions. So we raise one of our antennas over the light stanchions over the field, and that works very well for us. Another end of it has trees that we use to hang our dipoles in. So those are important things to make sure of. You also want to make sure you're not going to be stuck in a building where you're stuck in a Faraday cage type of situation. We looked at moving several years ago at changing parks, and the only other park we could find that met most of our requirements was bad for antennas, because there was a lot of metal around that would cause problems, and there wasn't a good place to hang there weren't a lot of good high places to hang antennas. So, those are some of the things, if you're doing an alpha, a club or a 3-man portable kind of operation, that I would look for. If you're doing a foxtrot, it's a little different. If you're working from an EOC, the keys there are going to be find a served agency that's going to let you use their EOC. And in that situation, in terms of equipment, you may be set. Particularly if your served agency is already bought on to amateur radio and you've already got positions in place. We see that, I mentioned the Southern Baptist Mission Board at the top of the show. They've got a radio room that's got amateur radio already set up in it. So in that case, you don't need to worry about radios and antennas. They're there already for you. You just got to get bodies in the chairs and get them operating.
Yeah.
So those are kind of the big things to look for when you're talking about finding a place. And then, I know guys, one of the guys in our club is going back up. He's from either Vermont or New Hampshire. I can never remember, but he's from New England. And he's going up to New Hampshire, and he's going to operate field day from a lake. He's going to toss a wire in a tree, and he's going to be, a portable operator on his own, operating off of whatever he can get power from with a wire in a tree. That's field day. And that's field day to him.
And that's probably one of the most relaxing types of field days you can probably do.
He's been bragging about it. He showed me pictures of where he's going to be operating from. And if I weren't so excited about what we do down here, I'd be envious.
So if you're not working at a served agency or running Class Foxtrot, how would you go about finding equipment?
Typically, the way we've done it and the way I've done it in the past is the members of the club typically volunteer equipment, or we ask members of the club if we can borrow their equipment. Or we use, my club's got some loaner equipment, so we've used some of that for things like the Go-To station. We're lucky in that, the vast majority of our club buys into the field day experience and what it takes to put on a good field day. And we have people that are willing to loan equipment to use for 24 hours. Mm-hmm. It may be if you've got a smaller club or if you're doing it for the first time and you're trying to figure it out, it may be, you go into your shack, you disconnect your radio and your power supply, and you take them out with you to where you're going to operate from, and figure out how you're going to get the antennas and how you're going to get the power to it. One of the big things about this is operating kind of off the normal grid, and that's one of the if you operate class alpha, that's kind of one of the prerequisites. Is you're not operating your radios and your transmitting and receiving equipment on shore power. So make sure you've got a power supply. We're lucky. We've got one of our club members who is a member of a VHF UHF contesting group here in the Southeast, and it's comprised of members from Georgia and the Carolinas and Tennessee. But he's got a 15 kilowatt diesel generator that he happily loans us every year for field day.
Oh, wow.
And we put 15, 20 gallons of diesel back in it at the end of the event to compensate him for the fuel that we used. And we can power just about everything at our field day site off of that one generator. We don't, because we don't want to run the risk of damage to power cords from cars running over them because it's in the middle of a parking lot. But we have other generators that club members donate for that, or let us use. They loan us for those kinds of things. So getting equipment is largely going to be an effort of, hey, we've got this field day thing coming up. Can we please borrow your radio for 36 hours or for 24 hours? And would you be willing to be part of field day with us? And that's how we get fairly good luck with that. So, equipment is, that's probably the hardest part.
Okay. So let's talk a little bit about how you plan your setups. How do you put all your radios together in one spot and put your generators in, farther away and your antennas farther away than that? Or do you spread them out quite a bit? How do you typically approach setting up or planning out your station?
A lot of how you do that is going to be driven by the location that you use. We are lucky in that we've got enough area within that 1,000 feet of circle that we can spread out a little bit. So we have in this parking lot, at the one end of the parking lot, we set up a tent. And the tent is where we put our sideband and our swing station. It's also where we put our satellite station and our VHF UHF station. That's largely where we drive a lot of our foot traffic to for new folks, that want to see what radio is all about, because that's where a lot of the gee whiz kind of magic happens. They can see the computer's set up with the logging software, and they can see on the satellite station we've got monitors up with the software that's tracking the satellites, and all the Keplerians are there, and you can see the big. We've got a couple that are members of our club that do the satellite for us, and they've got, I couldn't even tell you what the rig is. It's a multiple beams of multiple elements each beam for 2 meters and 70 centimeters on an Azel rotator, and it's very impressive when it starts moving. And it's a lot of, it's great for attracting the kids because it's a great gee whiz kind of thing. We have our Go-To station is in the picnic shelter, which is 15, 20 yards away, 30 yards away across the parking lot. And we do that. It's primarily driven by the fact that That's the closest spot to the soccer field that we put the 80-meter loop for the GOTA station, to be perfectly honest. That's why we put that there. We do put our CW station in another part of the park. It's off the parking lot, but it's kind of at the other end of the parking lot from the picnic shelter. And if you think of a triangle, at the base of the triangle, so think of an isosceles triangle, and at the base we got the GOTA station on one end, we got the CW station on the other end, and then everything comes together in the apex is where all the other stations are. And we put the CW station at another spot, and the reason we do that is this is actually kind of laughable a little bit. There are two reasons. One, to get the antennas as far away from the other antennas as possible. So, you've got the soccer field right behind us that has the 80-meter loop over it for the GOTA station. And then we've got at the front end of the parking lot, we've got beams for the satellite and for 6 meters and for the for the HF stations, and we've got dipoles in the air for those guys. So, the CW station is near a softball field that we put dipoles for them to try to get them as far away from everything else, because we want to minimize, of course, any interference. And the best way, the two best ways to do that are separation and put them in different geometric planes. So put the CW station over there, and that helps with that. There also was for several years, we've got a member of our club that's got a very nice, he's a big camper traveler. So he's got a very nice fifth wheel camper that he has always loaned us for field day, and our CW guys operate out of that. And it's nice and it's air conditioned and it's quiet, and the CW guys enjoy that.
That's just cheating. Working in a air conditioned location during field day, that's just not right. You lose some of the aspect of the sitting in the hot sun or the sweating and.
I will tell you, that's kind of a big joke. You're right. To be serious, part of why we started doing that was a number of years ago, we ran into a situation where we had a number of people that were volunteering to operate CW. However, they were of a stage in life where sitting in the 100-degree heat and the 90% humidity was probably not the best thing for them to do. And this was kind of a, hey, we want these guys to come and keep operating, and we don't want them to have a heat stroke while they're doing it.
Yeah, so that would be bad.
Yeah, that's a bad thing. And it just kind of, the gentleman that owns the camper just kept saying, hey, do you want my camper for field day? And we just kept saying yes. And it became, we had one year where we had all of our stations operating out of a camper or trailer device of some sort, and we had all these mobile homes set up in this parking lot. And we finally came to our senses a few years ago and said, wait, it makes sense for some of the folks that are operating CW, from a health perspective. But you've got guys in their 30s and 40s that are doing phone at night. They don't need to be in an air-conditioned mobile home. So, and the members of my club, God love them, they're probably going to skewer me for saying that. But I mean, the reality is that's where the whole camper idea came from, and it just kind of stuck. Even as we got new blood in doing CW, we just kept using the camper, and unfortunately, the gentleman that owns it sent us an email a couple of weeks ago, and he had an accident pulling out of a campsite, and the trailer's going to be in for repairs. So, we're going to have to come up with alternate arrangements this year, but I think we've got that covered. So,
well, at the risk of sounding kind of harsh here, at least if something were to happen along those lines, at least you could get your service agency's pictures while you're there. While they're taking care. I'm sorry, that was so wrong. I'm sorry, y'all. Oh goodness. So
Curtis, please don't wish that on us. We actually a couple of years ago. Seriously, I said at the top, safety first. We had a couple of years ago. We had a gentleman in our club that was helping out, and he lost track of making sure he was drinking enough fluids. and he ended up in the hospital. It was a record-breaking hot summer here in Georgia, and we did have somebody end up in a pretty bad way with some heat exhaustion. So let's keep the hydration.
Yeah. Hope that doesn't happen.
Yeah, let's make sure everybody stays properly hydrated.
So that kind of leads me into my next question. Perfect little segue thing there, even though it was not a very good comment. And like I said, I am so sorry for that. That was just so wrong of me. How do you deal with issues that come up while you're while you're planning for a field day?
Well, you know what? The good part is if you catch them when you're planning, it's very easy to get people around a table and say, okay, let's do some brainstorming. Let's figure out how we can solve this. And that's why that's why I don't do this by myself. That's why I have multiple people on my team. And that's why we talk every couple of weeks, during the field day planning process. Early on, we may talk once a month, a couple times a month. As we're getting closer now, we need to start having conversations on a weekly basis to make sure if anybody's running into any issues, we can resolve them ahead of time before we get to setting up for field day and get to field day. Obviously, it's when you run into issues during the operation, it's a little more challenging to solve them. But that's part of what ham radio is all about, is getting that ingenuity going and knocking out problems as best you can. And to be honest, we can't always solve all the problems that crop up at field day while we're operating. Sometimes the solution is make sure you tell us when you switch to that band so we can switch off, or tell you not to because we're not moving so that we can mitigate the interference. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, an antenna goes down. We've had antennas go bad, and, if you can't drop the antenna and it's not something that, a little solder and some heat shrink tubing can fix, you may have to say, well, we're not going to be able to use this antenna. So we take out that portion of what we were planning to do, and you just move on as best you can. I'm lucky in that I've got a lot of very, very smart people that are members of my club. A lot of people that are an awfully lot smarter than me. And they're all, when we call them and say, hey, it's field day and we've got this problem. Any suggestions? The suggestions are usually pretty quick to come, and usually we can find some way around an issue, with the tools that we have at hand, and it doesn't cause too big a problem for the field day operation. I can think of an issue that we had not that many years ago. You have to log your contacts for field day. That's, part of the whole, it's not a contest, but we keep score kind of game. And we had networked the logging software that we were using, and our network connectivity at our field day site went down, which meant we all lost connection to the database that we were using. The software in question used a shared database. And so we had to grab that database off the computer that it was on, get an export of it. That way we made sure we didn't lose everything we'd done up to that point. And then we had to switch all of the computers over so that they were using non-networked versions of the software, so they all had local databases. It cost us a few minutes of operating time, but we were able to make it happen. And that's just, one example of, you got to be willing to think on your feet and come up with a solution and be creative. And, if it's a little unorthodox, as long as you're not breaking the rules or putting anybody's safety in jeopardy, then you go for it.
All right. Well, that pretty well answers that question. I mean, I'm sure that, you're going to have backup antennas and backup radios and stuff like that. All the little contingencies that you can think of. I mean, the planning part of the field day is probably the most important leading up to it, because you have to think of all these things. It's just like doing emergency drills with your Aries group or something like that. Planning on failure is something that you have to do in order to have a good experience. And if you do have something bad that happens during field day, then you can plan for that the next year. So not only is it something that happens and you learn how to fix it, but then you can plan for it the next year. So,
yeah. And the biggest thing I try to impart on people is, remember, field day is supposed to be fun, and try not to get so bogged down in the minutia that one thing goes wrong and everybody throws their hands up and starts gnashing their teeth and wailing and rending cloth and saying, "Oh my God, it's over, it's ruined." It's the only thing you get if you do well at field day is bragging rights to see your call sign, at the top of your category column in QST in November or December when they publish the results. So things are going to happen. It's a temporary setup. You're putting it up really quickly. And, whether it's, oops, we forgot one of the elements for this antenna, or, you get up there and you start operating and a squirrel chews through a feed line. On the other hand, if you choose through that feed line at just the right point when you're keyed down at 100 watts, you might have an appetizer for your picnic later if you can get them on a spit.
Only in the South, my friend. Only in the South.
Hey, listen. So the Joy of Cooking cookbook has instructions on how to skin and prepare a squirrel. Just to say, like the 1965 or 66 edition, just so everybody knows. No lie. But, things are going to happen. It's a temporary setup. Nothing is going to run 100% perfectly. And if you go in just understanding that and knowing that you've done everything you can do to plan for the contingencies, go in and have fun and let your club have fun and let the world see what you do. And part of letting the world see what we do is, oops, this antenna broke. Do we have the right stuff on site that we can get a hold of quickly? Do we have a soldering iron and some solder and some shrink wrap, and can we fix it? Or do we have to back out and say, okay, we're just gonna kick that antenna to the side. We've got others that are up and working, and we'll just do without that one. So that's part of what we do and how we do it. So plan the best you can. Work out as many of those contingencies as you think you can work out. And just be prepared that if something happens, in this case, fortunately, field day is practice. It's not the real event. So you have the ability to adjust, overcome, and plan to do better for next time.
Right. All right. So I think that's a pretty good time to stop there. It kind of leads into my first question when we get back. So let's take another quick break, and we'll be right back with Ian, and we'll talk about during and after field day. So stick around. We'll be right back. All right, guys, so real quick, I'm not going to take a whole lot of time. This podcast really went a lot longer than I expected it to, but we have so far and continue to have a great conversation. So real quick, I want to mention, if you need QSL cards for your field day site or for your club or just for personal use, make sure you head on over to KB4IK QSL cards and place your order with them. A lot of great QSL cards that he has, as well as some swag stuff. He's actually where I get all of my swag store. He makes them for me to sell on my swag store. So head on over to KB3IHF QSL cards. There is a link in the show notes below, or in the show notes rather, where you can make it. And when you do place your order, please mention that you heard about him on the Everything Ham Radio podcast. I will get a small affiliate commission with your purchase. Also, speaking of the swag store, if you go to everythinghamradio.com/store, you will be able to see the swag stuff that I have. I got some coffee mugs, I got some mouse pads, I got some travel mugs, some coasters, and a couple of little items that are on there. And I'm working on getting more as well. So I'm working on t-shirts and hats and stuff like that. Hopefully I will have that up in the coming weeks. But definitely check that out and order those from QSL cards from KB3IHF from Randy, the awesome guy. And he will do you right. So let's go ahead and get back to the last part of our interview with Ian real fast. So here we go. Back to Ian. All right, we are back with Ian. We are talking about field day. Last segment we talked about the leading up to field day. Let's talk about what actually goes on during field day and after it, especially. Let's talk about setup. When can you set up for field day?
Well, this year's rules packet says you can start setting up at 0 UTC Friday of that weekend. In Georgia, that's about 8 o'clock Thursday night. By that time, it's starting to get dark and nobody wants to be out in the dark shooting tennis balls over light stanchions and trying not to shoot light bulbs out in the process. So we typically start Friday morning. You have a grand total of 24 hours that you can use for setup. So if you start setting up at 8 o'clock Thursday night and you run all day Friday, you need to make sure you leave enough time because you're going to need to do some setup on Saturday morning. You just, particularly if you're setting up in a public place, there are some things you just don't want put together and sitting out there unguarded, in an exposed space. So plan your 24 hours. Here's when you can start. My group starts about 10 o'clock Friday morning. And typically all we do on Friday is get the loops and dipoles in the air. That's all. A couple of tents get set up. But those are handled by professional, we rent tents for the parking lot for where we put our stations in, and we get the ones that have fold down sides so that if it rains, our radios don't get damaged or anything. A good deal of setup, though, in our organization starts about 7 o'clock Saturday morning or 8 o'clock Saturday morning with people getting, the radios in place and feed lines connected and power supplies up and the generator shows up and generators show up. We get the power run out to all the stations and we generally take 3 or 4 hours Saturday morning and we get all that done and get all the final tweaks done. So that's when you can do it. There's also, if you wait until the official start of field day, which is 1800 UTC on Saturday, if you wait until then to start your setup, you get 3 extra hours to operate on Sunday after everybody else has already shut down and gone home because we burned through our 24 hours. Depends how big an event you're doing. It depends where you're doing it. It depends when you can get to where you're doing it. So in part of our lease agreement with the park, with the city parks and rec department that we have, we can actually get into our park starting at 10 a.m. Friday and can start hanging antennas. So, how big are you doing it? When can you get into the facility you're using? Plan out your 24-hour setup period.
So, in your experience, is it worth waiting until the official start time to get those extra 3 hours?
I couldn't tell you. I've never done it. We always set up ahead of time, and we're always done by 1800 Sunday afternoon. We're always shutting down and cleaning up. The bigger thing, actually, what we've found historically is we can get plenty of people at the park early Saturday morning to help us put up antennas and help set up. Mm-hmm. Teardown is usually when we have a harder time getting people because it's on the East Coast, it's 2 o'clock Sunday afternoon. It's the middle of the afternoon. It's June in Georgia, and that means, late June in Georgia typically means high temperatures and high humidity. And a lot of us have already been out in it for 24 hours. So, if you have to pick up late, you're going to be able to get people to help set up, because everybody knows setup is tough and it takes time. And it's that, you can see some of the gee whiz when you're doing that. Make sure you plan and get enough people to help you tear down as well. That's important for a good field day as well, is getting cleaned up and getting out of wherever you're using quickly and making sure you left it in as good as or better condition than you found it.
Right. Absolutely. That's a major thing right there. Make sure you leave it better than you found it. Yeah. Now, here's a question to all y'all listeners, okay? That really brings up a question in my mind. What benefits are there for waiting till the official start time and getting those extra 3 hours? Because, I think of a lot of people, especially those that have the massive stations, they're not going to start setting up at the start time, because if it takes 6 hours to put their station up, then they basically lost 3 hours. So you're probably looking more along the lines of a smaller organization or a smaller field day unit that's going to be doing something like that. And then, so you have all these people that are setting up beforehand and running just a 24-hour period, and then are going to be off the air at the end of the 24-hour period. So what kind of contacts are you going to make in those last 3 hours? So if any of y'all out there do this, wait until the official start time to set up your station. I would really love to know about it. Please leave a comment in the show notes and let me know your experience of it. And again, you can find that at everythinghamradio.com/podcast/71. Leave a comment in there. Let me know what your experience is if you do this and wait until the official start time. So other than your main stations, your 3 alpha station, we've talked a little bit about this, but let's go a little deeper into it. What else do you do during field day?
Well, of course, we've got the GOTA station. We talked about the GOTA station. We talked about the satellites and the VHF, UHF. So we've got all that. Our Aries guys are set up. I don't think I talked a lot about them, and they're actually a big part of our field day is our local Aries group. They've got the mobile command posts from our two police agencies, from two of the police agencies that are served agencies for that group. And they are showing off Go kits, and they're doing digital, they're doing WinMore and WinLink for Aries and emergency communications. They're showing those things off, and they're showing off how they work with the served agencies. So that's big for us, and that's important because we want the public to know that we do have those relationships, and we work hard to maintain them and work hard to keep the relationships with our served agencies. And we do a few other things. We try to get some local elected officials out to the field day site, and when they come out, we do kind of a dog and pony show with them, and we get them at the GOTA station on the air. Something that we do ahead of time, it's not at field day itself, but the city that we live in and that we operate in, Roswell, Georgia, we have a pretty good relationship with. And every year during June, the mayor and city council issue a proclamation for us. And we're not the only municipality. We're not the only group that has this happen. This happens, in a lot of places. But we show up at the city council meeting, and we're all wearing our club polo shirts, and we're there when the mayor issues a proclamation declaring the week of field day to be Amateur Radio Week.
Wow!
And he declares, an amateur radio day over field day, and that's great for us because it's the city council meetings are they're government meetings, so they're open to the public. So we may have, some people there from other areas of the community, and it gives them a chance to hear, a few minutes about who we are and what we do. Usually there's some media outlets there, and it only happens occasionally, but sometimes one of them picks it up and says, oh, this would be a great feature to run with, a great kind of human interest story, and we get a little mileage out of that as well.
Not to mention your bonus points.
Not to mention our bonus points. We also do, I think I mentioned before, radio merit badge with the Boy Scouts in the area, and we publish out to a number of the troops that are in our geography, and we say, hey, we've got 25 or 30 seats. We're doing a radio merit badge. It's tied to Amateur Radio Field Day coming out. You can spend 4 to 6 hours with us and get earn the merit badge. And you're one closer to your whatever your goals are, and we've gotten a few new members out of that as well. So you expose kids when they're young, and hopefully we're lucky and we can get one or two that we spark an interest with. And out of 30 kids, if we get one that's interested, then that's a win. That's a huge win for us.
Mm-hmm. So not only is it a preparation event for you, but a public information for everybody else, and also a training event as well.
Absolutely. And by running the Merit Badge Clinic, we get the 100 bonus points for having an educational opportunity.
That's really neat. I mean, that's something that, I've participated in several field days, but most of them have been on the smaller end. I think one year we did like a 3 alpha, but most time it's like 1 or 2 alpha. And the last couple of years we've done it at our county EOC, and we're have the radios and stuff set up there and the antennas and all that good stuff. But one of the things that we probably lack on is something like that, showing off a little bit more of what we can do as amateur radio operators, and especially along the lines of like the digital modes, because that's gonna catch the eye of the younger generation, typing on a computer rather than talking on the radio.
Right.
I would think so.
And we talked about that some during the PSK31 episode as well. And I had said at that point, I think that we were doing we were going to run our swing station as PSK for a couple hours at the top end of field day for just that very reason. And unfortunately, we've had some challenges and changes in the club, so that's not going to happen now. That swing station is still going to have the capability of running digital, though, for people that want to come and run digital and want to see it. So we're not completely abandoning it. We're just having to reshuffle how we were approaching it a little bit.
So speaking of computers, let's talk a little bit about logging, because I know logging is a major aspect of this contest that's not a contest.
Right.
I know when the first couple of years that I did it, we did it on paper, and then we found this nice old DOS-based computer, and that just tells my age when I started doing this. And it was great because you typed in the call sign and it said dupe. And it's like, cool, I don't have to work this station anymore. I can go on to somebody else. But the first couple times working on paper, the first time I heard it, I made a call to somebody, and he comes back to me and says, and bear in mind here, y'all, I was probably about 19, 20 or so when this happened. It comes back, and the guy says, "You're a dupe, old man." And it kind of hit me back because, I didn't know the old man and the young lady terms. Shame on me. First off,
gotta learn the language if you're gonna play the game.
But here I am, this 20-year-old guy, and this guy's calling me an old man, and then he calls me a dupe on top of that. It's like, what? No. So
he's not calling you an old, young, stupid, naive sucker. That's not what he was doing.
But
believe it or not.
Things have come so far, and my understanding of the whole thing has come so far. I look back now, and it's like, really. But when you first get involved in amateur radio, and you don't have a good Elmer or a good somebody to work with to teach you these things, you kind of get thrown back like that. But when we're talking, when we moved into the logging software, it was just a local computer, and we didn't have the networking and stuff and all the stuff that is now. I mean, I heard a while back, I don't remember what episode it was, but there was a guy that was talking over on the Ham Radio 360 podcast that I listened to, that was talking about, I believe it was one of the field day episodes, that he was talking about where he set up a Raspberry Pi as a server, and that's what they ran all their computers off of. That's where the local or the database was held at. So there's so much you can do nowadays. So let's talk a little bit about different softwares that you've used and that you've had experience with, so to speak. So what do y'all use first off?
So the last couple of years and this year we're using N1MM Logger Plus. And we started using N1MM Logger Plus a couple of years ago when a previous field day captain decided that for us it was going to be all about the contest. Because for those that aren't familiar, it's kind of the de facto logging software used by contesters and de-expeditions. It's robust, but it's fairly easy to use. And one of the reasons it was chosen by this predecessor of mine, and the reason we kind of like it is the way it handles networking is, I hope I'm getting this correct because I wasn't involved in picking out the software and setting it up initially. The way it handles the software for networking, for its networked mode for field day, is each individual system stores its log locally, but they all query each other over an IP network. So the CW station knows that the phone station is on 20 meters, and so it can tell the CW folks where it is. So don't get on 20 meters. Go to 15 or 10 or 40 or whatever. And it can query the others to find the dupes. So if my swing station is working 20 meters and my main phone station is on 15 meters, but when the main phone station was on 20, it worked station X1YZ, and my swing station is now coming up on X1YZ on 20 meters, it knows it's a dupe. So there was a lot of network capability that was looked for in the we're going to run this as a contest philosophy. And I kept it. I not the philosophy. I kept N1MM Logger Plus for this year because it's configured, it works, and we've got everything in place already. The one thing that I didn't talk about during equipment was the computers. And last year, I believe, our club went out and spent a few $100s and bought laptops for field day purpose. So we have dedicated club-owned laptops. That's all they're for is field day. We have the member of my team that's our technology captain has the laptops, and he's made sure they're all checked out and they're ready to go and they're set up. And we have another member of the club that has loaned us Wi-Fi, I guess, boosters, so that the CW station can talk to the other stations and make sure they're not, running the dupes. They can query the logging software. Other logging software that was, and I like N1MM Logger Plus. I think it's fabulous software. I use it at home for contesting. So it's a fabulous piece of software, and it's well supported and well maintained. The group that writes it and supports it is very active on their Yahoo group and very responsive to end user needs. The other piece of software we've used historically is the N3FJP logger software by Scott Davis, N3FJP. It too is fabulous and wonderfully supported software, but it's fabulous in a different direction. It's fabulous because it is such a clean, simple to use piece of software. And I actually kind of hope Scott listens to this, to the podcast. It's unintimidating and unassuming software, and it's great for those of us that have been doing this for years and know what we're doing. Piece of cake software, we all know it. We've all used it before. But the real beauty is it's not intimidating for people that are new to amateur radio and new to field day and new to operating in a sort of, call it a pseudo contest operating event. It's enter the call sign, hit, I can't remember if it's tab or the space bar. Different applications do it differently, but change fields during a high operating event. It's just really, N3FJP is just really clean, really easy to use. And I know I personally haven't used it in several years. I know Scott has made several improvements to it over the last several years in terms of capabilities and robustness. And N1MM Logger Plus is very robust and has a great set of capabilities as well. So those are the two ones that I've had the most experience with. I like both of them for different reasons, and we're using N1MM Logger Plus this year.
So would you say maybe that the N3FJP one would be more along the lines for a newcomer, and the N1MM one would be more for the experienced one, or maybe a steeper learning curve?
Yeah, N1MM Logger Plus does have a little steeper learning curve, but it's free, completely free. You can go download it and play with it to your heart's content and get familiar with it and get familiar with the capabilities that you will use for field day. Scott Software N3FJP is free for 30 QSOs, I think. So, you can download it and play with it for 30 QSOs. But then, he's running a business and he's trying to make a few dollars off of it. So, if you're going to use it, please, support him and, buy a license key and support him and use it. It is simpler for a newer ham to use. In fact, when somebody is new to amateur radio and they ask me what I would recommend for logging software, I send them to him. Go use the N3FJP Logger Plus, or N3FJP Logger. I'm sorry, I'm confusing my softwares now. He's got a great package where you can buy every application. So he does a primary logger, then he does a field day logger, and then he does a logger for about 1,000 different contests. And for a very nominal fee, you can buy the whole package. And it's like $45 or $50. It's not a lot of money. For the new guys, that's always the direction I send them in. Use that, see what capabilities he has built into it, get comfortable with it, get comfortable with logging. If you decide you want something else with a little different capability set, come back to me and we'll talk about that later. But yeah, I would say if you're going to use N3FJP, if you've got a lot of younger hams, younger being in terms of ham lifetime, not necessarily that younger folks can't understand the other software, but newer hams, the N3FJP is definitely a less intimidating piece of software. Whereas some of the other logging software packages out there, if they have a more robust feature set, there's going to be a little more learning curve associated with them.
Mm-hmm. So does the N3FJP one, does it have? How does it work with the network? Does it have a central database and then everybody queries it, or is it like the N1MM one where it queries and stores locally?
The last I heard, and it's been several years, so I don't know if Scott has updated this or not. The last time we tried to use N3FJP in a networked capability, it uses a centralized database, so you've got to have good network connectivity.
So when we are done with field day and we're gathering our logs, how does the localized databases affect the way that you export your log file versus one that's stored centrally?
What we've done in the past is our computer captain, our technology captain, hits each computer and does an export of the logs to a thumb drive or some other storage medium. And we then go take them back to another computer and we do an import and compile everything that way, and then do a final export of that one file. I hope I'm explaining this right. Sorry, I'm starting to get on the long end of my day here. But we have to do a little bit of compiling on the back end of merging of logs. So that is one thing to think about. Is it takes a little bit more work on the back end to get 2, 3, 4, 5 logs into one log, as opposed to if you use say N3FJP or something that uses a centralized database in network mode. It's one log, you export it, and you're done. Where we like the N1MM Logger Plus better is if there's an issue with our network connectivity, we don't end up in a situation where we're scrambling and where we end up losing contacts or could lose contacts because of logger software downtime.
Mm-hmm.
If you've got, and we've solved the networking problems. We've got very good, very robust networking now. We use wired networking in our primary station where we've got the VHF, UHF, and the satellites and the phone station, our swing station. And then we've got very powerful Wi-Fi repeaters between our CW station and the rest of the setup. So we've kind of taken that out, but for other reasons, we're still using N1MM Logger Plus for other capability sets. If you've got a good, robust network and you're not going to lose connectivity, it's nice to be able to export one log and be done with it, right?
Mm-hmm.
At the database.
I guess that this is the networking aspect is probably along the lines of where an Arden mesh network would come in really handy. Not only would you be able to talk about the Arden networking aspect of amateur radio, but you would also be able to use it and functionality of it to communicate with with your different stations.
Yeah, and there's actually an article in the June QST, I believe, on setting up an Arden network. So tied to Field Day.
Very good.
So there you go.
So we're done with Field Day. We've exported our logs and we've got them all into one file if we didn't have it that way in the first place. Mm-hmm. What kind of walk us through what it takes to wrap up Field Day and submit it?
So the league has a website, and unfortunately I don't have that URL in front of me. There's a website you can go to where you can enter your logs and say, hey, we've earned all these bonus points, and do all your tallies, and then you have to send evidence of your bonus points up to the ARRL because they're in the old Reagan model of trust but verify, right? Mm-hmm. So they trust that you did it, but they want to see some evidence that you did it. And you need to send in there's some other aspects of the log that you need to send in, and it's all explained in the rules packet and on the website. It's important to get everything into one place and have one person, and I've got somebody on my team whose job is going to be and has volunteered to put together and submit our final score packet. I've also got somebody on my Field Day team who has stepped forward and said, hey, I'll be the guy that makes sure that we have the evidence that we need for the bonus points to get to the guy that's doing the scoring packet so he can have all of that in one place and get it all together. So, you've got to get your evidence together or your proof. Get all the photos that you may need, get your attendance, if you keep a sign-in sheet for people that come, get an output of that if you do it electronically, or make, copies of it if you keep it on paper and, the old-fashioned way, to send in. Your GOTA logs and your GOTA score are logged and scored separately as bonus points from everything else. So make sure that your GOTA captain has good logs and good record keeping for the GOTA station. And in the Field Day packet, there's samples of the forms that you can use for scoring the GOTA station and for keeping those records as well. Those are the kinds of things that you need to pay attention to. Pay attention to when the score submission deadline is, because if you miss it, then they'll use your log for a check log, but they're not gonna score your packet when you get it in. So make sure you get everything in on time and by the deadline.
Okay, so that brings up an interesting thing, and let me make sure that I heard it right. Does the GOTA station contacts, can you make the same contact with somebody that's on your regular station?
I think so, actually, because they're scored separately. GOTA is scored separately from the rest of your Field Day site. In fact, your GOTA station, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, your GOTA station has to operate under a different call sign from the rest of your Field Day station, but it still operates as whatever everything else stays the same. So, for example, our go-to station will operate as 3 Alpha, in Georgia. And for people that are interested, I'll throw a shameless plug out there. Our field day call sign is going to be Kilo 4 Juliet Juliet, and then our field day, our go-to station is November Foxtrot 4 Golf Alpha. So two call signs managed by our club, and we use both of them. We use K4JJ for the primary because obviously it's shorter, and NF4GA is our go-to call sign. So yeah, you score it separately. It's got its own kind of sub packet that goes in with everything else when you send it. And there's a place on the main scoring forms and paperwork to put your go-to score as well and transfer it over. But it does have its own kind of different set of papers to go in.
Well, if it has its own call sign, then you really don't have to worry about being a dupe other than a dupe by itself.
Right. Exactly.
Very good. So, anything else that we need to discuss a little bit about on the aftermath of field day?
Yeah, I said it before. It bears repeating. Make sure you have enough people to help tear down. A lot of organizations, and we see this every year. It's the same people tearing down that have been at the field day site for most, if not all, of field day. Some of them may have been there since 7 or 8 Saturday morning helping set up. So it's crucial to have kind of some fresh blood out there helping tear things down so nobody gets hurt, so mistakes don't get made, so that you can get everything torn down and cleaned up as quickly and efficiently as possible. And one of the things that we always strive to do is leave the park in better shape than when we found it, if we can. And that helped us build a very solid relationship with the folks at City of Roswell Recreation and Parks that were the folks that were in charge of renting out the park and making sure we could access the facilities because they knew we were going to take care of it when we used it. You want to leave a good impression with the agencies that you're working with. So, because you want to be able to come back next year and do it again. And you want them to know they can trust and they can trust that you're going to take good care and be a good steward of the property.
Right.
So just be mindful of those things. I think I've said all I could say about the scoring packet and all that kind of stuff. So,
well, one question that just popped into my head: how would you recommend, or how do y'all handle when somebody's going to be operating? Do y'all have like an hour blocked out timesheet that people sign up for and say, I'll operate from 1 to 2 a.m. on Sunday morning? Do y'all just do it as a first come first served basis? How do y'all work on that, or how would you recommend doing that?
We try to get operators to volunteer to sign up ahead of time, and each of the station captains has a little different way that they handle that. I think our go-to station captain is using a Sign Up Genius, which is one of the free web-based kind of calendar sign-up things. Our phone station captain has another online tool that he likes to use. The man that's running our sideband station for us is also our manager for 13 Colonies, which is the week following, runs the first week of July. I'm going to shamelessly plug another event here for you, because we're really involved in that as well. But he has a whole other calendaring system that he uses. In conjunction with the 13 Colonies that he uses with Field Day as well to get signups. Get as many people to sign up ahead of time as you can, particularly if you want to run a more contest-style competitive field day, because you need backsides and chairs operating stations. If they're sitting idle, they're not making contacts, they're not scoring points. Mm-hmm. Our thrust is exposing the public and being that public kind of steward, if you will. So, we try to get people to sign up ahead of time. We want as many people signed up for blocks of time, and our captains this year are doing it a little differently. We used to say, 1 hour blocks from like 2 to like 6 Saturday, and then we went to 2 hour blocks for the rest of the event. We're letting them do it how they want to do it now. So, you may say, I can come and I can operate for 30 minutes after the picnic on Saturday. Great, take a 30-minute block. We'd rather have somebody operate for a shorter time than have a big block sit unfilled.
Mm-hmm.
But we make sure that there's opportunity for people who just walk up as well and say, oh, hey, can I get on the air for 30 minutes or an hour? Absolutely, we'll find you a seat and find you some operating time.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a kind of a balance you have to strike.
A lot of the field day events that I've participated in, I know the hardest times to fill is like early Sunday morning, like 2 until 6.
Those overnight shifts are a beast.
Yeah, they were always the time because I worked midnight shift at the time, and so that was always the time where it's like, okay, well, I'll do it. I'll let the new people, those that don't have a lot of experience, or those that want to get on, come in on Saturday, or late Sunday morning or something like that,
mm-hmm.
and do those. I'll take the time, deep nights where nobody wants to do. So.
Yeah, and we've actually got members of our club that prefer doing that. We've got a couple of folks that love working CW overnight. We've got one member of our club in particular. We have a couple of people that fit this bill, but we've got one member of our club in particular that's a professional musician. So he's used to being up late at night because he's usually playing, until midnight, 1, 2 in the morning anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So he'll come in and he'll do phone during some of those awkward early morning hours that are hard to fill. So, we're lucky that way. We've got people that like those slots. But that is one of the biggest challenges because, everybody wants to be there on the front end,
mm-hmm.
When everything's new and fresh and there aren't a lot of dupes yet. And it's the excitement there. And a lot of people want to operate, they want to come in Sunday morning. They maybe they get up and go to church really early and they come in when they get done at church, or, if they're not, if they're not going to church, then they can come in and they can sleep in a little bit on Sunday morning and come in at 9 or 10 o'clock and operate for a few hours. So,
mm-hmm.
Those are always easier to fill. The overnighters, and there are groups around here that say, we're going to operate until 10, 11 o'clock Saturday night, and then we're going to shut it down and we'll come back at 8 o'clock Sunday morning and go from there.
Yeah.
So different groups handle that differently.
Yeah. And that all comes back to the question of, how do you want your field day?
That's it.
Yeah. Well, Ian, I greatly appreciate you coming on. This has been an awesome conversation. I hope that all of y'all enjoy it as much as I have. So thank you again for coming back.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I appreciate you having me back. And I do want to say one other thing around field day, if I may.
Yeah,
if I can beg your indulgence. Go to a field day. If you're in, North Georgia, this is the open invitation to come to the North Fulton Amateur Radio League Field Day. And if you're not and you want someplace to go to Field Day, and you don't know where to go, look for your local amateur radio club. You can typically find a club in your area by going to the ARRL website. Or there is a section on the ARRL Field Day site called the Field Day Site Locator. And you can put in your zip code and a radius of 15, 20, 30, 50 miles, whatever, that you want to search for a field day site near you. And it will put in, you put in your zip code and your radius, and it'll pop up if the organizations have registered their field day with the ARRL, or registered them in the Field Day Finder site. You'll be able to find sites in your area. And I can tell you that my field day site is registered. It's registered under a Kilo 4 Juliet is the call sign if you want to search it that way. Or the area that we're in per zip code is we're in the 30075 zip code area. Or they can go to my club website and www.nfnovemberfoxtrotalpharomeo.org, and there's information there as well. So, but please go to a field day site somewhere and participate, because it's a lot of fun. It's a great experience. And, if you're new to amateur radio, MCOM is one of the things that we're all about. And this is our annual show and tell to the public of what our MCOM capabilities are. So take advantage and let the world know.
Absolutely. And there will be a link in the show notes of today's episode to the Field Day site locator as well. So check that out. Again, you can find it at everythinghamradio.com/podcast/71. So, Ian, thank you again for coming on, and hopefully we can do this again some other time.
I look forward to it. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me back. I'm glad the other episode went so well, the PSK episode, and I look forward to doing it again, Curtis.
All right, great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
73.
73, sir.
Bye. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so we are coming to the end of our episode. It was a great conversation with Ian about Field Day. A lot of information in there, and I hope that y'all took away at least one thing. I know I took a lot of stuff away from him. Ian, thank you again for coming on the show again, and hopefully this episode does as good as the last episode does. I'm pretty sure that it will, for sure. But that pretty much wraps it up. I'm not going to do the hand blog spotlight because we've gone so far over. We're well over 2 hours already, so I'm not going to do that in this episode. But I do want to mention one more time, the show notes can be found at everythinghamradio.com/podcast/71. That's number 71. On there is a link to the Field Day site locator, all of the information on Field Day, some previous episodes that we've mentioned in the interview itself, as well as links to the logging software that we talked about. So a lot of other information in there, so I highly recommend that you head on over to the show notes and check them out. Again, the question on does your club set up before or after Field Day starts, and if after, why do you set up afterwards? Do you find that extra 3 hours is worth setting up after the official time starts? And last but not least, the Facebook question of this week is what class station does your club run if you run a Field Day? Do you do 3 alpha? Do you do 34 alpha? Do you do 15 Foxtrot? What class do y'all use in your club Field Day setup? So that pretty much wraps it up. Thank you very much for listening, and I'm sorry that it went over a little long, but I just couldn't stop. I mean, it was a great conversation. One more time real quick, follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/everythinghamradio, on YouTube at youtube.com/everythinghamradio, and on Twitter at K5CLM. If you have not done so already, please subscribe to my email list. There is a link at the bottom of the show notes that you can sign up, or you can go to everythinghamradio.com/subscribe. Fill out the form, click on the sign me up button. You'll get an email from me with a link that you'll need to click on in order to get emails from me. And last but not least, if you've liked what you heard here and you would like to help support this podcast, there are several ways that you can do it. You can make a one-time donation through PayPal, which there is a link on the bottom of the show notes. You can become a per-episode contributor through Patreon, or you can simply shop on Amazon.com through my affiliate link. And for those of you that have already done it, thank you very much for that. I've had quite a few people do it here the last couple of months, so thank you for that. Thank you for supporting this podcast, and I hope that you really enjoy it as much as I do making it. So I guess until next time, this is K5CLM signing out. 73, y'all.